Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Healing and Freedom Journey. I am your brother from another mother, Mark DeJesus, bringing you insights as you walk along this journey. I'm all about mental, emotional, and relationship health, and if you are too, then you've come to the right place if these videos are a blessing to your life. Do me a favor, click the like, subscribe, and you can also go to markdejesus.com where there are hundreds of resources for your mental, emotional, relationship health, your healing and freedom journey, and it's a delight to be able to share these things with you and empower your life. Today, what I want to get into is a subject that is very challenging to walk through, at times challenging to talk about, but I want to bring some insight that I think if you're open and willing to learn some new perspectives, that this can actually be an area of great healing and great growth, because within what I'm going to share with you, there has actually been some of the most phenomenal areas of growth in my life, areas of treasured overcoming and healing that I want to be able to support and bring into your life. But this word triggered, it gets used a lot. It gets used to the point where it's now in the cultural circle and way that people interact. At times it can get overused, and in that process it can lose, well, what are we meaning? What are we talking about? And so I'm gonna walk through talking about this word triggered, explain it a bit, and then we're going to get to what to do when this happens in your life, in your journey. So a little bit of understanding up front. First of all, when we talk about the word triggered or being triggered, we're talking about a strong, often intense emotional reaction that happens within us. It's often to something that is said, usually something that is said to us, or something you experience, and what something does or something that happens that that hits your system. Yes, it can be something that we talk that has traumatic in its work, but this is often being triggered. It has a connection to something in our history that's being ignited in that moment. Triggering areas represent a vulnerable place in our life. It's a vulnerable place in our heart. It's often areas that are unloved, empty, wounded places, often unaddressed areas of our life, the areas of our broken heart. And what a trigger can do is often send a signal to us that, hey, this area needs healing. Now, for many, they don't recognize the signal, they don't take it in, and so the triggering can lead to worse things, and it can make their mental and emotional health worse. It can erode relationships, and it can make their journey very, very, very challenging. So in these triggering moments, we can often feel maybe a great sense of anxiety. That anxiety can well up. I know at times in my life, it would just rush right into my chest, hit my neck, and it would just overwhelm me to the point where it's all I could see, it's all I could feel. It can move easily into a sense of panic. Overwhelming, anxious fear can begin to take over. You can feel a sense of shame hit you. If you go back over to my resources on shame, I talk about shame attacks, where you feel this sense of overwhelming shame that hits you in that moment. And many of us, when we're getting triggered, we're actually getting hit by either fear or shame or both of them at the same time. It's hitting us, and it clouds your vision. It creates a sense of despair, further dominoing your emotions. It can hit an anger place. Many times our anger areas where someone wants to snap in anger, or someone gets hit with anger so much they can go into a sense of rage, or that feeling where you can kind of go from 0 to 60, where that anger hits so strong. Many OCDers, and of course I do a lot of work in the area of obsessive compulsive, they get triggered when their subject of disturbance hits. So if they have religious OCD, it's some kind of issue in their faith walk, or many of them. It could, if it's relationship OCD, anything that has to do with commitment or moving forward or the right person, or any area of cleanliness or order, wherever OCD hits, that subject of disturbance, it becomes triggering. And we often react to it in ways that don't help us in the long run. The aspect of triggering can often hit areas that have a traumatic history. There's a traumatic imprint. It doesn't have to necessarily have a full-on large T trauma for it to have an imprint. It can be a series of bad experiences. It could be certain belief systems that have developed over time. But one of the things that happens in the midst of triggering that I want to bring out is this sense of disconnection. In these moments, you feel a sense of separation from feeling safe, from feeling connected safely to God, to yourself, or the world around you. And it can be all three. Oftentimes you feel all three, and it can feel very dark and isolating. And that's a very challenging place to be. So it's important that we learn, okay, what do we do with these kind of moments? Now, again, I'm not trying to replace any therapy you're getting or any psychologist input in your life. I'm a brother from another mother, but I have a lot of experience in this in my own life, in my work in ministry, help with others, and just navigating this journey. So I really want to share some of these important insights. So up front, what I want to share is there are some unfruitful, unproductive ways that we react that are not helpful. Don't see this in condemnation. Don't beat yourself up. Don't spiral. But we need to be sober about what is not helping our journey. We have to recognize, okay, these areas are not helping us in the long run. Now, one of the ways that we do that is we react in a fear on top of fear, meaning anxiety kicks up, fight or flight starts to happen, right? And with fight or flight, we do a couple of things. We either gear up in stress to fight. We get more amped up, which can lead to anger, can lead to striving, defending ourselves or arguing or whatever. Or we do the flight. I got to get away. I got to get out of here. I got to displace myself. I've got to avoid anything like this, right? Or we can freeze and get into a freeze moment. And in this, what we can start doing is escalating the initial anxiety that's there starts to escalate because we feed it. We beat ourselves up. We go, what's wrong with me? What's happening? Maybe I'm losing my mind. And I found this was one of the first areas I had to learn to renew because I would stack shame and fear on top of a battle I'm already having, right? So what we want to do is we want to minimize adding to what's happening in your emotional life. I talked about shaming ourselves, where we shame ourselves and beat ourselves up. I know I would do this like, what's wrong with me? Why am I like getting hit with these emotions? And I'd start beating myself up. Another danger in how we react is that we target others. And when you get triggered, beware of making another person the sole source of this problem, because then what happens is now we become obsessed with focusing on that person, what they said, what they did. Now we're practicing arguments in our head, right? Now we're like thinking about what they should get and what they should deserve. Then a bitter root can get in there. And now we're getting toxic over a bitter perspective, and we're not seeing things in a more helpful and productive way because we're lost in the distraction of somebody else. We can also overreact in general. Do you find you can overreact? We all can. I do it. You do it. We all do it. We're feeding the unhelpful emotions. We can act out in that moment. We start venting. We lose it. We start yelling. We call someone. We go off on them about what happened with somebody else or something else that was said. Or we go off on that person that's right in front of us. We write an email. That's not a good email. We write people off. We leave. We cut people off. We make harsh statements. We make harsh decisions. We say things that we will at times later regret. Many of us can, in unfruitful ways, we spiral, we drown in it. When I talk about shame attacks, I talk about where we can just get lost in the drowning of it. Many can defend their trigger and what they feel, that we feel this sense of, I'm 100% right, you're 100% wrong, and we create this very black and white battle that I'm doing things right, you're doing things all wrong, and we defend what is triggering. And we can act on it. More anger gets fueled. Many obsessors become compulsive in what triggers them. And so they're sending a religious OCD, here's a sermon, and the sermon goes into an area that triggers. Maybe it's a salvation thing, and it triggers. And now they're doing researching, and they're asking the pastor after church, and they're looking for reassurance, and they're helping. And they go in this spiral because of something that got triggered. And they're needing to actually learn a renewed response to what's being triggered. And so we have many unhealthy coping responses that take place. What are things that you find that you do? I know that many will have certain emotional triggers that will engage from a trigger, so to speak, where they're unhealthy coping mechanisms. Some of those are like where they just shut down. They come, you've been with somebody in a conversation and all of a sudden, boom, it's like they're not there anymore. They're just not present. They're not engaged. They like disconnect from the interaction. Maybe it's a group, or maybe you're sitting at a table and they're just not there. Or we withdraw, we isolate. Many times we can go into a self-pity or a self-loathing that is very unproductive and that fuels the drowning. And then we can put that on other people. And now we're having very unhealthy, emotionally unregulated interactions with other people. And we have to recognize this. Where do you find in what I just shared is where you can often go when something triggers you? Some of this is like 0 to 60. Sometimes it slowly builds. But what I want to bring to you is that triggers can be deeply challenging. They can hit you at the core of your life. Sometimes you feel like, oh, I'll never get through this. I'll never be able to overcome this. But we need to understand that where you get triggered, these can be amazing discoveries for healing and freedom, providing that you're able to look at it without shame. When we remove shame from the picture, you can see yourself from a compassionate place, in a place that's helpful. Now, as a brother from another mother, I need to share some things up front that we need to understand to kind of let these things process. Even as I share them, I'm like, oh, I know this is going to bring up a lot of stuff with people, but I need to talk about the challenges when it comes to being triggered. Challenges, and what I mean by this is it's challenging to talk through these areas. But if you can have ears to hear, this can be very, very helpful for your healing. The first thing to realize is that places where we get triggered can actually become redemptive, meaning that God can step into these areas, if you'll allow him, and actually take them, heal them, and use these areas for fruitful purposes. So I'm not trying to jump into the subject of triggering and just jump into the bright side. Well, look at the bright side. Well, look at the bright side. No, I'm going to tell you up front. Some of your triggered areas can become absolutely debilitating, challenging you to the core, at times taking you out. So I get that. But I want to bring in some perspectives to see the big picture, because we need to see the big picture. God is always in the work of redemption, meaning that's what Jesus did. He brought a ransomed work to ransom, to buy back, to take back. That word redemption speaks of that. And he's always in a redemptive work. We look at our pain, we look at our struggle, and we start to spiral in shame. God, where were you? What are you doing? Where are you? Right? Which is normal in the journey. David did it. You even see Jesus himself, on the cross saying, God, why have you forsaken me? In the darkness of what comes against us, there is that part of the process where we go, God, what's the deal? But big picture, what God is doing a work of redemption to take that which is broken and bring life to it, and show the power of what the gospel brings into our life and into our journey. Folks, if I was to look at the areas of my life that have shown fruit in my personal life, my marriage, my family, and to the work that I bring to you today, if you're blessed in any way by what I share in these video broadcasts, understand most of it has come out of the deepest hell I've been through, the deepest pain, and some areas that were triggers that at times I was wondering, would I ever even get free of these? And so please understand, I'm not using this as a just look on the bright side kind of thing. Just keep that in mind. There's hope for your future. There's hope for this. If we'll learn and hang in there, some of the greatest beauty can come out of some of your greatest pain. In fact, why I'm doing everything I'm doing today in my ministry work has come out of places of pain. So please understand that, so that we can begin to allow some helpful perspectives to come into the picture. Second, we have to understand safety, because in being triggered, we want to feel safe. We want to recover our sense of safety, right? But we have to realize cultivating safety does not mean you never get triggered. I don't want to encourage a life in my brothers and sisters that when we establish safety, that it means we're going to live in a bubble and we're going to create this sterile existence in our life that doesn't have anything that bumps up against us. We actually need refining. We need sharpening. It's a part of life. In no way am I excusing abusive behavior or even keeping people around you all the time that are very toxic influences. I'm not encouraging those kind of things. But what I am saying is that you and I, need to learn resilience. And part of resilience is learning to get hit, we fall flat on our face, and learning how to step back up and what that means and what that looks like. You need in your life the muscles of your emotions to be stretched. The areas where I was triggered and continue to be triggered are areas of muscles that are still in development. I'm learning to develop those muscles, but I don't develop those muscles by just developing thick skin or just being hard on myself or being militant. I develop stronger muscles by learning to first be kind to myself, but then learning to practice new ways of living and reacting. I remember in my pastoring work, many people would come to my church and say, I need a safe place. I need a safe place. But as I began to talk with them and walk with them, I had to often realize them, yes, I want this to be a safe place for you, but we're a family. Because many times we can get so focused on, I need safety for me. And we don't take into the consideration that we need to be able to learn how to strengthen our muscles. And sometimes some things hit and we learn how to walk through it. But two, I would have to remind the person, I'm creating safety for a whole body of people. We're learning as a family how to. And there are times where our unredeemed and unhealed stuff is going to bump up against each other. I tell people I've even worked with that there are times or things I'm going to say may hit a place of hurt, hit a place of offense. I never mean to. There's so many times where people will say, oh, this thing you said triggered me. And I had no idea. Meanwhile, I am talking with a sense of, as much as I know in my heart, grace and compassion and connection to people's journey. And even in that, you still can ignite many people's triggers. So this is an understanding that we have to realize. Safety means we're learning to connect who God is and that he is a safe place, a shelter. But we also have to learn how to become safe within ourselves. I mentioned this before. I've said this in other broadcasts. I was asked by a counselor who was working with me, what's been the most helpful thing in your journey so far? And I said, right at the top is me learning how to have a more compassionate, kind, patient relationship with myself, learning to respond in more loving ways, in a way that helps me to step forward in growth and even maturity, because part of healing leads us to maturity. We mature in these areas. Jesus said, in this world, you're going to have trouble. And sometimes we go, what, God, why didn't you, and we forget that Jesus said, you're going to have trouble. Stuff's going to come against you. But understand, I've overcome the world, and who I am in my overcoming has now been passed down to you. God is calling us to be overcomers, but in order to overcome, you need some stuff to go through. And every single person listening and watching to this broadcast, you have stuff you've been through, and you have stuff you are going through. And all those areas are marked with a journey of you learning to live as an overcomer. You're going to face trials, and they're going to hit you, and you're going to hit difficulties. And God's perspective is, I'm going to be kind, compassionate, and gracious. I'm going to love you all the way through. Be faithful. And I'm also going to teach you how to heal and overcome. And what you overcome and are continuing to overcome will be what you bless other people with. So this is very important to understand. Listen, the sins of other people will come against you. But God has a mission and work of bringing out the powerful light of who he is in some of the darkest places of what you experience and what gets triggered in your life. Now, here's something that I've learned. If you don't agree, that's fine. But I think this could really help your journey, is understanding that people can say things that have helpful information, but lack grace, kindness, and care. When I look back at my journey, there are many moments where people have said things that were actually helpful, But they did it in a way that wasn't nice, it wasn't kind, it wasn't gracious, there wasn't nurturing. It was harsh. And you can experience that too, where people say things, and what they say could have been helpful, but they did it in a destructive way. They did it maybe even in an abusive way. They did it in a way that was not seasoned with salt, as the Bible says, where the grace of God is at work in it. Listen, people can say accurate things, but they can be a jerk about it. But I found as I let myself heal, I could look back and go, yeah, they had a point there. You know, they said it in a terrible way, right? Because it's not necessarily the message that we need. It's the messenger. How it gets sent to us is often the important thing. I've had many things that come to mind. One that I share a lot is in my relationship OCD journey. There was a couple people that said this kind of statement to me, that Mark, if you don't start changing things, you're going to be 65 and alone. And it was hurtful. It hurt me and caused me to spiral a bit. But as I began to pick up the pieces and recovered from those triggered potential moments, I realized, you know what? There was something there that they said that's true, that's actually sobering and was helpful. But in that moment, it wasn't, because it's just how it was said. That's why we as believers, we need to learn how to talk and communicate in ways that are compassionate, productive, in gracious ways. But even then, no matter how gracious or loving we are, it will still cause certain people to get hit in certain areas that we don't even mean. And we have to realize and recognize that. And so long-term healing, I'm going to kind of go long-term. As I've healed in certain areas where I look back and I no longer am spiraling about those experiences, I began to see things from a fuller perspective. I even saw where somebody else was at. Didn't mean what they said and how they said it was okay, but I was able to see it from a bigger picture. And I could say, I understand where they're coming from. I understand what they were trying to say. I can even look back and go, hey, they were right. But they just said it in a way that wasn't very helpful. I remember years and years ago, I came out with a recording album. I had there was a bunch of music that I did for in my church that I served at, and I decided, you know what? Many people said, I like the way you sing it, so I put an album together, and it cost a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of aggravation. But anyways, I put it out, and it was mainly just to be able to offer it to the church and the people that wanted to hear those songs. Well, I remember giving it to a friend of mine, and I was excited, and he had some experience being connected to musicians, and I shared it with him as I'd love to hear some feedback, and this is where I learned the tough road of going into recording music, which would then prepare me for the tough road of putting out YouTube and Rumble and podcasting content. He hit it hard about where certain parts of it weren't produced well, and there was this and that, and I could feel myself just shrinking in the car as he was talking to me, and I felt myself just like wanting to just leave and just go to another planet because it hit me, right? Now, looking back, it's like, yeah, he was right in everything he said, but man, it hit me hard, and it hurt. And it almost took me out. It made me actually hate the work. And my perfectionism kicked into gear, and it was like I despised it and hated what I did there. It wasn't able to be a loud place of learning for me because I got hit. There's been many times of certain feedback and certain things that now I look back and I go, and they were right. Now, I'm talking about in that area, but triggering can involve a lot of areas and a lot of things. Jesus took a mindset of, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they do. That's an area of a mature, healed perspective of looking at things, because then that opens up a forgiving heart. And what's helped me in the forgiveness process is being able to see it for what it is. That's what forgiveness does for us. People don't take up space in our hearts and minds where we're thinking so much about them and overthinking about that situation. We see it for what it is. So now it's in the grand picture of where even God could use it. And so there's experiences now that were very, very painful that can now be used for the benefit of what I share with others. So long-term healing helps you see things in a more balanced way. You can even see, well, I can understand where they're coming from. I'm not saying it's okay, but I can also see the brokenness where they were at that fueled some of their ungodly or toxic behavior that was said or what was done. Okay, so that's just an important insight for us to understand. We also need to realize, and remember I said these are the challenging areas. This is like I'm going through the rough waters first, is that triggering often reveals areas where we get easily offended. And it's one of the areas of my journey that I want to become, if this is even a word, more unoffendable. And what helped me in my life is seeing areas that offended me, letting myself learn how to renew those areas. Because some of those areas had areas that were infiltrated by a bitter root, and I needed to process forgiveness. Some of it brought up areas where I was hard on myself, and I needed to be more loving, compassionate, and forgiving towards myself. Also revealed areas I needed to learn. I had some perspectives that were distorted. And I actually saw things in my value system wrapped around it, and I defended it. And I actually needed to learn and in some ways relearn in our life. Because when we get offended, we can get really stubborn in those areas. I'm telling you. And those areas can create strife, and now it damages relationships further. That's why the Bible warns about offenses, because Jesus said, just know offenses are going to come. You're going to be offended. And I would say the biblical word for being triggered can also be offended. Interesting, right? And so being someone that had a very sensitive heart, I had to learn how to compassionately respond to what I'm getting triggered with or even getting offended with. And then in the kindness and graciousness of God, learn new responses. And forgiveness is an important aspect because in forgiving, you learn to forgive others, but I found it's important to forgive yourself. And when I practice forgiveness actively, it gives less room for the triggering to own me in the long run. You see, that's the goal. Is as I practice, the trigger no longer owns me. Because when triggers own us, we either defend them or we avoid them at all costs. I can't go anywhere near that because it's going to trigger me. And now it starts to domino into many other areas where it spreads. So now I never want to be around any, if you had a toxic experience with a pastor, now you never want to ever be around a pastor, anyone again, right? And now we're limiting the healing that's available. And so anyways, forgiveness gives me the ability to untie myself from the sin and toxicity of others. So I can go, I'm going to move on with my life. So here's what I want to encourage you in when it comes to how to respond to triggers. When we talk about what to do and what are ways that we can learn fruitful responses. Number one is when you get triggered, instead of reacting, delay instant reaction and take a pause. One of the problems with being triggered is we react and we're now feeding what hits us. You can't stop something from hitting you in a certain way. Sometimes we think we can. The emotion hits. What you can do is learn to not feed it. And one of the ways we do that is we delay reaction. Pause. I'm not just going to feed where this thing is going, where it's hitting me. I actually need to let this emotion work its way through. I'm not going to go, shut it down. I'm not going to also feed and drown in it. I'm going to let it have its work through me. Okay? And so that's an important first step. Now, secondly, this is where the heart of the journey is in learning to heal in this area of being triggered, is learning to practice unconditional love towards yourself. This is where triggering is all about, is you learning how to respond to yourself differently. Many times what we want is we need other people. I'm triggered, so I need everyone else or the other person to completely understand what I am. And it starts with you. And it starts with unconditional love that says, it's okay that I'm not okay right now. It's okay that I'm spinning out. I'm having something like it'll hit me, hit my chest, my emotions are just, whoo, it's overwhelming. And I found, I tried millions of different things, it seemed like. Maybe not millions, but it seemed like. And I realized the greatest way, Paul's right, the greatest way is love. And so when you practice this gracious perspective, this compassionate perspective, it lessens the impact of the triggering moment. When the trigger happens, it hits and it meets with love. Love has a way to to cushion it because you nurture yourself. It makes you less reactive to others because you're less reactive within you. You feel what you're feeling. It hits you in a certain way. Okay, it is what it is right now, but I'm not going to add to it. I find it so helpful for me to remember this trigger will not last forever. I can get through this. I'm just learning how to have new responses. So I'm okay when the trigger hits. You know, I'm not okay, but I'm okay at not being okay because I realize something's working through me. There's something to learn here. I'm practicing. See, we need practice. And if we're going to experience healing and freedom, we need practice. Well, triggers are a big place of learning to practice. And I remind myself this isn't forever. It's like a roller coaster ride. And I don't really like roller coaster rides. I don't enjoy them. So it's a great analogy for me. But I do know something. If I go with my kids and they go, we want to go on this, right? Then I know it's going to be over in just a few moments. And we have to remind ourselves in a compassionate way is that this isn't going to last forever. What we often do instead is we go into shame, we go into added fear, and we add to the problem. And so we're going to make a shift. Pause, don't react, turn on love. I need to let love turn deeper into my heart. It's okay that I'm not okay. Now we're practicing self-compassion and nurture. And so furthermore, in number 3 is I want to learn, and to all my brothers and sisters in mental health areas, wherever you are, learn how to lovingly notice versus obsessing, being compulsive, ruminating, spinning. I gotta, getting deep into the ditches of it. Lighten this up and just learn to notice. Whew, wow, look at this. I'm really worked up in here. This is time for you to actually learn about your emotional life and learn how to enhance it. Now, this is not introspection, staring. No, noticing is like noticing a plane flying by. I noticed that. And then the next time it flies by, you notice something. Oh, okay, you notice something else. You're in the learning process. Something's going on here. Okay. Many in the tribe, they get obsessive and they write to me, what is this thing? What trauma is it? Where does this trauma come from? Did something happen to me when I was a kid? Is there something in trauma I need to, okay. So many times we can get obsessive over trying to find trauma. So it's not that. It's I'm not reacting in the moment. I'm just noticing, okay, I'm reacting this way. There's some learning I'm going to have here. Now, what we often do is we make it about the other person. They said something that hurt me, and now we get focused on, we got to tell that person and fix that person. Now, it happens in a relationship where you say, hey, you know what? Could you just not say it that way? Could you be kinder about it? Hey, what you said hurt me. That didn't help, right? We have that, but we can get lost in that we don't actually develop our emotions in productive ways. I often find in the loving environment, now again, this can't be done in shame and rage, in a loving perspective, I ask myself, okay, what's the history to this emotion? What's the history? When I'm feeling that in my chest and that tightness, what does this moment right now represent in my history? And you'll often find, I remember in this situation when this happened and I felt this. And you know what I tell people? I said, okay, now keep going. Is there anything more further back? I remember when I was a teenager and doesn't this. Okay, cute. And then it often goes back to childhood. There's certain moments where this represents that. And the trigger in an unproductive way, what it'll want to do is it'll want to keep you acting in that unhealthy pattern so you don't experience healing and freedom. What God's wanting to do is let this be a signal. This represents something in my history. I mean, think about it for a second. Why is it that certain things bug you right down to your very last nerve? But there are other things in your life that you go, no big deal. And you're actually patient with yourself or other people in that area. Why is that? Interesting, right? Why is it, for example, a classic example is many people have road rage. Now, I don't have a lot of road rage. I can have in certain instances where I can go from 0 to 60, okay? If I'm driving on the highway and somebody cuts me off, I can go, they're probably having a bad day or they're in a hurry. Whatever. Go ahead, do your thing. It's just for some reason, it just doesn't bug me. But many other people, they go from 0 to 60, how dare you, right? And they fly off the handle and they get so upset, right? That represents something in their history that triggers the 0 to 60. Now, for me, and I've had this happen where it went all the way up through me, sitting there at a light, and I happened to glance down at my phone or glance down something on my dashboard, and I didn't catch that the light just turned. And somebody behind me goes, meh. You know what I'm talking about. Not that, meh. And it startles my whole being instead of alerting me. Oh, reminding me. Oh, sorry. And I feel just all hitting up through me, right? Because in that moment, what's it hitting for me? See, we often don't look and lovingly notice and reflect. What's it doing? It's revealing an area in me. I feel disrespected in that moment to an intense degree. When have I felt disrespected in my life? In other areas. Wow, that can domino into a bunch of areas. Okay, God, I'll invite you to bring healing into that area. To know that you notice me, you love me, to fill that place in my heart, right? And so the history can be informative. Now, beware of going black and white. And what I mean by black and white is we make these heavy value statements. I am terrible. I'll never get over this. I'll never heal. Or something happens to you, you kind of have a blanket statement. All these people are blank, right? Like I said, if a pastor did something that was hurtful, all pastors are jerks. All pastors are greedy, right? Or the never, I will never. Or this always is going to happen to me. Or we just do a complete shutoff valve. So beware of your black and white areas that you go into. It doesn't let you see things from a healthier perspective. Here's a tip I find, if you'll take this and walk with it, it'll be very helpful for your life, is don't demand that everyone around you or other people completely understand what you're going through. Sometimes what we do in relationships, for example, is we'll enter into a relationship and we wear all our mental health battles on our sleeve. We put it right out there. This. And you need to recognize that what you're going through in your battles, those are pearls. Those are pearls. And don't throw your pearls before swine, meaning don't just share it with everybody, every place. Show that there's credibility and rapport where a person can be a safe place to understand. And don't go through life expecting, I need everyone to understand this is a weak area for me, that this is a troublesome area for me, because we create an unhealthy expectation that in order for us to heal, we need our environment to be just right. In my own journey, I realize, and be honest, is that in certain weak, struggling areas, I became loyal to my suffering because I needed people to understand. As soon as we start talking, I needed to get to that point and share this thing that I'm struggling with them. And I realized that I was becoming loyal to my struggle. I was becoming loyal to my suffering. And it wasn't actually letting me get free. You have to realize that people aren't going to understand. They're not going to necessarily understand everything you're going through or working through. This can be a real place of wisdom if you'll apply it. And so I'm going to allow God's gracious healing to open up in my heart. And here's some questions I often ask. What am I believing right now that needs renewal? If I'm in this state and it's welling through me, what am I believing right now? I'm lost. I'm alone. There's no help. I am in danger. Interesting. All these alarms are going off. Are they true? Well, maybe the person you're talking to is not really a safe person. Okay, it's okay. You can walk away from this conversation, right? But now I'm still carrying that. What perspective needs healing? How do I see things in life that this triggering thing has an infectious work on my perspective and my worldview? So how can I respond in a new way? What's a new pattern? And as I'm learning in my journey, how can I be gracious and forgiving? Because as God has forgiven me and is gracious to me, I want to show that to you. It doesn't mean that I'm going to allow your abuse in my life. It doesn't mean I won't practice boundaries. It doesn't mean that I don't say no to certain things. All those things are important, but I don't want to carry the toxicity of this. So I want to learn to be gracious to myself and therefore gracious to you. And so now what's key is I'm going to learn how to practice renewed responses. It's really the response that needs tweaking, adjusting, because when you practice a new response to it, you move things in a totally different direction. Because usually we respond in kind of a, clockwork. Boom, 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 boom happens. And then we end up in an unproductive state. It doesn't help us to be empowered. I want to empower you. So it starts with your reacting lovingly. 2, don't let the impulse take over. Give yourself a chance to recalibrate. And what is a more healthier or more fruitful kind response I could to myself that will then help how I act in that moment? I found in my research and reading, I was looking at DBT, for example, which is dialectical. I always have trouble saying this word, dialectical behavioral therapy. And the reason that this kind of therapy was brought about was to help people with personality disorders or even borderline personality disorder, where there's massive swings in the moment, up and down. Not necessarily like bipolar, although certainly can be helpful. And bipolar tends to have broader, where the up has time and then the down has time. With borderlines, it can be more rapid in the mood changes, right? And it was interesting because I had a friend of mine who's in social work, and he said, a lot of things I hear you talking about sounds like dialectical behavioral therapy. And as I dove into it, I was like, yeah, there's some really good practical things. There's workbooks you can get. There's good journaling where you learn in your journaling, okay, in these kind of moments, how can I respond? And it's done in love. It's done in compassion. What are ways I can renew my beliefs? So in the moment, I'm not just drowning. I have a life preserver I can grab. The life preserver is the new way of responding, where I myself have said, okay, don't verbalize. You don't compulsively verbalize you're hurt right now, because you're going to spin out, be compulsive. You're going to be angry, and you're going to. Right? And I would just delay that. Okay? Be kind to myself. And you know what, one of the things I learned? I didn't even need to get to the forgiveness stage, because I would just let it go and let it go through me. I don't need to fuss over that. Now, my inside would pitch a fit. My obsessive compulsive pull would, we got to fix this thing. I got to let you know. And I just let it work through me. The Bible says it's a glory of a man to overlook an offense. And so it made my journey stronger, not by being Mr. Tough Guy, but by learning to be loving and compassion. And I learned to let things work through me. So for some of you, some DBT resources may be helpful. You can look those up on Amazon or wherever and find some workbooks of practice, how to respond to your emotions in more productive ways. You don't necessarily have to have a personality disorder. And I'm looking at this going, this is helpful for all of us. So that can be a blessing to your journey. But give yourself room to practice. This is patience. Let patience have its perfect work, the Bible says. And we're all learning to be patient with ourselves. And you're learning how to be compassionate to yourself. And part of that, you don't have to be better by yesterday. You don't have to be better overnight. In love, let the learning open up. Now, you may need someone to sit down with you and give you some helpful feedback and help coach you through, whether it's, some type of coach or counseling or therapy that will help you to go, here's some better tools. And if you open yourself up to those better tools, it'll teach you to learn to respond in renewed ways. Of course, I have a whole page dedicated to mental health. You can go to markdejesus.com/mental health. Was this video valuable for you? Hit the like button, click subscribe, go to the website, get on our mailing list so you can read about the updates that I send out. If this video blessed you, would you go to markdejesus.com, click on the donate button, and that will help support these broadcasts that I put out on a weekly basis. It's a privilege and an honor to be your brother from another mother, to be able to share these insights for your healing and freedom journey. And Lord willing, and the creek don't rise, I'll be back. But in the meantime, I'm out.